Section 6 of Weird Tales, Jules de Grandin, Volume 1, by Seabury Quinn. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. The Isle of Missing Ships, Part 2. The lads led us through another bewildering series of corridors till our sense of location was completely obfuscated. Finally paused, one on each side of an archway, and, bowing deeply, signaled us to enter. We strode into a long, marble-tiled room which, unlike every other apartment in the queer house, was not brilliantly lighted. This room's sole illumination was furnished by the glow of 14 wax candles set in 2 7-branched silver candelabra, which stood at opposite ends of a polished mahogany table of purest Sheraton design, its wax surface giving back reflections of crystal and silver dinner service fit for the table of a king. "Ah, gentlemen!" Gunong Bassar, arrayed in immaculate evening clothes, greeted us from the farther end of the room. "I hope you have brought good appetites with you. I'm fairly ravenous for my part. Will you join me?" The same Malay servitors who had accompanied him at our meeting stood behind him now, their semi-military khaki jackets and sarongs exchanged for costumes of freshly ironed white linen, and their rifles replaced by a pair of large-caliber Luger pistols, which each wore conspicuously tucked in his scarlet silk cummerbund. "Sorry I can't offer you a cocktail," our host apologized as we seated ourselves, "but ice is not among the improvements available in my modest little menage, unfortunately. However, we find the sea caves do quite well as refrigerators, and I think you'll find this chilled wine really acceptable as a substitute." "Ah!" He looked diffidently from one of us to the other, finally fixing his gaze on me. "Will you be good enough to ask the blessing, Dr. Trowbridge? You look as if you might be experienced in that line." Startled, but greatly reassured by the request, I bowed my head and repeated the customary formula, almost springing from my chair with amazement as I opened my eyes at the prayer's end. While de Grandin and I had bent above the table during grace, the servants had pulled back the rich batik with which the wall facing us was draped, revealing a series of heavy plate-glass panels against which the ocean's green waters pressed. We were looking directly onto the sea-bottom. "Jolly clever idea, what?" Gunong Bassar inquired, smiling at our surprised faces. "Thought it all up myself. Like to see the little finny fellows swim past, you know. Had a beastly hard time getting the workmen to do the job for me, too. But all sorts of unbelievable persons trickle into these islands from time to time. Architects gone gaga with drink, skilled artisans with all the trades and what not. I finally managed to collect the men I wanted." "But, monsieur, the expense," de Grandin protested with typical Gaelic logic. "It must have been prodigious." "Oh, no," the young man answered negligently. "I had to feed the beggars, of course, but most of 'em were habituated to native food, and that's not very expensive." "But their salaries," de Grandin persisted. "Why, monsieur, this house is a work of genius, a marvel of engineering. Even drink-ruined architects and engineers capable of producing such a place as this would demand fabulous fees for their services. And the labourers, the men who cut and polished the marble here, they must have been numerous as an army. Their wages would be ruinous." "Most of the marble was salvaged from deserted Dutch colonial palaces," Gunong Bassar replied. "You know, Holland built a mighty empire in these islands a century or so ago, and her planters lived in palaces fit for kings. When the empire crumbled, the planters left, and he who cared to might help himself to their houses, wholly or in part. As for wages," he waved a jewelled hand carelessly, "I am rich, but the wages made no great inroads on my fortune. Do you remember your medieval history, Dr. de Grandin?" "But certainly," the Frenchman responded, "but—" Don't you recall, then, the precaution the nobles, ecclesiastical as well as temporal, took to ensure the secrecy of their castle or cathedral plans?" He paused, smiling quizzically at de Grandin. "Parbleu! But you would not, you could not, you would not dare!" the Frenchman almost shouted, half rising from his chair and staring at our host as though a mad dog sat in his place. "Nonsense! Of course I would, and did," the other replied good-humouredly. "Why not? The men were bits of human flotsam, not worth salvaging. And who was to know? Dead men are notoriously uncommunicative, you know. Proverbially so, in fact. But you tell this to me." De Grandin looked at him incredulously. Our host's face went perfectly expressionless as he stared directly at de Grandin for a period while one might count 5 slowly. Then his dark, rather sullen face lighted with a smile. "May I offer you some more wine, my dear doctor?" he asked. I looked alternately at my companions in wonderment. Gunong Bassar had made some sinister implication which de Grandin had been quick to comprehend, I knew, and their subsequent conversation concerning dead men telling no tales contained a thinly veiled threat. But try as I would, I could not find the key to their enigmatic talk. Medieval castles and cathedrals? Dead men tell no tales? I repeated to myself. What did it all mean? Gunong Bassar broke in on my thought. "May I offer you a bit more of this white meat, Dr. Trowbridge?" he asked courteously. "Really, we find this white meat," the words were ever so slightly emphasized, "most delicious. So tender and well flavored, you know. Do you like it?" "Very much, thank you," I replied. "It's quite different from anything I've ever tasted. In a way it reminds me of delicious young pork, yet it's different too. Is it peculiar to the islands, Mr. Gunong?" "Well, he smiled slightly as he cut a thin slice of the delicious roast and placed it on my plate. "I wouldn't say it is peculiar to our islands, though we have an unusual way of preparing it in this house. The natives hereabouts refer to the animal from which it comes as long pig, really a disgusting sort of beast while living, but quite satisfactory when killed and properly cooked. May I serve you again, Dr. de Grandin?" He turned toward the Frenchman with a smile. I sat suddenly upright in utter dumbfounded amazement as I beheld de Grandin's face. He was leaning forward in his chair, his fierce little blue eyes very round, and almost protruding from his head. His weather-tanned cheeks had gone the colour of putty as he stared at our host like a subject regarding a professional hypnotist. "De grand Dieu!" he ejaculated in a choking whisper. "Long pig, did you say? Sang de Saint Denis, and I have eaten it! My dear chap, are you ill?" I cried, leaping from my chair and hastening to his side. "Has your dinner disagreed with you?" "Non, non," he waved me away, still speaking in that choking whisper. "Sit down, friend Trowbridge, sit down. But par l'amour de Dieu, I beseech you, eat no more of that accursed meat, at least not tonight." "Oh, my dear sir," Gunong Bassar protested mildly, "you have spoiled Dr. Trowbridge's appetite, and he was enjoying this delicious white meat so much, too. This is really too bad, you know. Really it is." He frowned at the silver meat platter before him a moment, then signalled one of his attendants to take it away, adding a quick command in Malayan as he did so. "Perhaps a little entertainment will help us forget this unfortunate contretemps," he suggested. "I have sent for Miriam. You will like her, I fancy. I have great hopes for her. She has the makings of a really accomplished artista, I think." The servant who had taken away the meat returned and whispered something in our host's ear. As he listened, Gunong Bassar's thin, well-bred face took on such an expression of fury as I had never before seen displayed by a human being. "What?" he shouted, forgetting apparently that the Malay did not understand English. "I'll see about this. We'll soon see who says must and shall in this house." He turned to us with a perfunctory bow as he rose. "Excuse me, please," he begged. "A slight misunderstanding has arisen, and I must straighten it out. I shan't keep you waiting long, I hope. But if you wish anything while I'm gone, Hussein," he indicated the Malay who stood statue still behind his chair, "will attend your wants. He speaks no English, but you can make him understand by signs, I think. Quick, de Grandin, tell me before he comes back," I besought as Gunong, accompanied by one of the Malays, left the room. "Eh?" replied the Frenchman, looking up from an absorbed contemplation of the tableware before him. "What is it you would know, my friend?" "What was all that word juggling about medieval builders and dead men telling no tales?" I demanded. "Oh, that," he answered with a look of relief. "Why, do you not know that when a great lord of the Middle Ages commissioned an architect to build a castle for him, it was almost tantamount to a death sentence? The architect, the master builders, even the principal workmen were usually done to death when the building was finished, in order that they might not divulge its secret passages and hidden defences to an enemy, or duplicate the design for some rival noble. Why then, Gunong Bassar meant he killed the men who built this submarine house for him," I ejaculated, horror-stricken. "Precisely," de Grandin answered, "but bad as that may be, we have a more personal interest in the matter. Did you notice him when I showed surprise he should confess his guilt to us?" "Good heavens, yes," I answered. "He meant that, though still breathing, we are, to all intents, dead men," de Grandin supplied. "And that talk of white meat and long pig?" I asked. He drew a shuddering breath as though the marble-lined cavern had suddenly gone icy cold. "Trowbridge, my friend," he answered in a low, earnest whisper, "you must know this thing, but you must control yourself too. Not by word or sign must you betray your knowledge. Throughout these devil-ridden islands, wherever the brown fiends who are the natives eat men, they refer to the cannibal feast as a meal of long pig. That so unfortunate man we saw dead at the stake this morning, and that pitiful Dutch woman we saw clubbed to death, they, my friend, were long pigs. That was the white meat this devil out of lowest hell set before us this night. That is the food we have eaten at this accursed table. My God!" I half rose from my chair, then sank back, overcome with nausea. "Do you suppose it was her flesh?" "Shh!" he warned sharply. "Silence, my friend. Control yourself. Do not let him see you know. He is coming." As though de Grandin's words had been a theatrical cue for his entrance, Gunong Bassar stepped through the silken portière at the doorway beyond the table, a pleased smile on his swarthy face. "So sorry to keep you waiting," he apologized. "The trouble is all adjusted now, and we can proceed with our entertainment. Miriam is a little diffident before strangers, but I persuaded her to oblige us." He turned toward the door through which he had entered and waved his hand to someone behind the curtains. Three Malays, one a woman bent with age and hideously wrinkled, the other two vacant-faced youths, came through the doorway at his gesture. The woman, bearing a section of bamboo fitted with the drumheads of rawhide at each end, led the way. The first boy rested his hand on her shoulder, and the second lad in turn held tightly to his companion's jacket. A second glance told us the reason for this procedure. The woman, though aged almost to the point of paralysis, possessed a single malignant bloodshot eye. Both boys were sightless, their scarred and sunken eyelids telling mutely of eyeballs gouged from their faces by unskilled hands which had torn the surrounding tissues as they ripped the optics from the quivering flesh. "Haroom! Haroom!" cried the old crone in a cracked treble, and the two blind boys seated themselves cross-legged on the marble floor. One of them raised a reed pipe to his lips, the other rested a sort of zither upon his knees, and each began trying his instrument tentatively, producing a sound approximating the complaints of a tomcat suffering with cholera morbus. "Haroom! Haroom!" the hag cried again, and commenced beating a quick rhythm on her drum, using her finger-tips and the heels of her hands alternately for drumsticks. "Takuka! Takuka! Takuka!" The drum beats boomed hollowly, the first stroke heavily accented, the second and third following in such quick succession that they seemed almost indivisible parts of one continuous thrumming. Now the pipe and zither took up the tribrach tune, and a surge of fantastic music swirled and eddied through the marble-walled apartment. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, a repetitious, insistent, whining chant of tortured instruments, an air that pleaded with the hearer's evil nature to overthrow restraint and give the beast within him freedom, a harmony that drugged the senses like opium, or the extract of the kola-nut. The music raced and soared, faster, shriller, and higher. The painted silk curtains swung apart, and a girl glided out upon the tessellated pavement. She was young, 16 or 17 at the most, and the sinuous, lithe grace of her movements was as much due to healthy and perfectly coordinated muscles as to training. The customary sarong of the islands encased her nether limbs, but instead of the native woman's jacket, her sarong was carried up beyond the gold 6-inch wide belt about her waist and tightly wrapped about her bosom, so that it formed a single comprehensive garment covering her from armpits to ankles. Save for a chaplet of blazing Chabachan rubies about her slender throat, her neck and shoulders were bare, but ornaments in the form of flexible golden snakes with emerald eyes twined up each arm from elbow to shoulder, and bangles of pure, soft gold, hung with triple rows of tiny hawk-bells, circled her wrists. Other bangles, products of the finest goldsmiths of India, jangled about her white ankles above the pearl-encrusted slippers of amethyst velvet, while the diamond aigrette fastened comb-fashion in her sleeky parted black hair was worth a king's ransom. Fit to ransom a monarch, too, was the superb blue-white diamond of her nose-stud, fixed in her left nostril, and the rope of pearls which circled her waist and hung swaying to the very hem of her sarong of Philippine pineapple gauze was fit to buy the peacock throne of the Grand Mogul himself. Despite the lavishly applied cosmetics, the antimony which darkened her eyelids to the color of purple grape-skins, the cochineal which dyed her lips and cheeks a brilliant scarlet, and the powdered charcoal which traced her eyebrows in a continuous, fluted line across her forehead, she was beautiful with the rich, ripe beauty of the woman who inspired Solomon of old to indite his Song of Songs. None but the Jewish race, or perhaps the Arabian, could have produced a woman with the passionate, alluring beauty of Miriam, the dancer in the house beneath the sea. Back and forth across the checkered floor the girl wove her dance, tracing patterns intricate as lace from canary or the looms of spiders over the marble with her soft soles of her velvet slippers, the chiming bells at her wrists and ankles keeping time to the calling, luring tune of the old hag and her blind musicians with the consummate art of a Spanish castanet dancer following the music with their hand cymbals. At last the dance was done. Shaking like a leaf with the intoxication of her own rhythmic movements, Miriam flung herself full length, face downward, before Gunong Bisar, and lay upon the marble floor in utter, abject self-abasement. What he said to her we did not understand, for the words were in harsh Malayan, but he must have given her permission to go, for she rose from her prostration like a dog, expecting punishment when its master relents, and ran from the room, bracelets and anklets ringing time to her panic flight, pearls clicking together as they swayed with the motion of her sarong. The old crone rose too, and led her blind companions from the room, and we three sat staring at each other under the winking candlelight, with the two impassive Malay guards standing motionless behind their master's chair. "Do you think she is beautiful?" Gunung Besar asked as he lighted a cigarette and blew a cloud of smoke toward the copper ceiling. "Beautiful," de Grandin gasped. "Mon Dieu, monsieur, she is wonderful, she is magnificent, she is superb. Death of my life, but she is divine. Never have I seen such a dancer, never such, nom de Dieu, I am speechless as the fish. In all the languages I know there are not words to describe her." "And you, Dr. Trowbridge, what do you think of my little Miriam?" Gunung addressed me. "She is very lovely," I acknowledged, feeling the words foolishly inadequate. "Ha ha!" he laughed good-naturedly. "Spoken with true Yankee conservatism, by Jove!" "And that, gentlemen," he continued, "leads us to an interesting little proposition I have to make you. But first, you will smoke? You will find these cigars really good. I import them from Havana." He passed the polished cedar humidor across the table and held a match for us to light our selections of the expensive tobacco. "Now then," he commenced, inhaling a deep lungful of smoke, "first a little family history, then my business proposition. Are you ready, gentlemen?" De Grandin and I nodded, wondering mutely what the next chapter in this novel of incredible surprises would be. "When we met so auspiciously this afternoon," our host began in his pleasant voice, "I requested that you call me Gunung Besar. That, however, is what we might call, for want of a better term, merely my nom de lie. Actually, gentlemen, I am the almost honourable James Abingdon Richardson." "Parbleu, monsieur," de Grandin demanded, "how is it you mean that, the almost honourable?" The young man blew a cloud of fragrant smoke toward the room's copper ceiling, and watched it float upward a moment before he replied. "My father was an English missionary, my mother a native princess. She was not of the Malay blood, but of the dominant Arab strain, and was known as Laila, Pearl of the Islands. My father had alienated himself from his family when he and an elder sister deserted the Church of England and, embracing a dissenting creed, came to Malaya to spread the gospel of repentance or damnation among the heathen in their blindness." He drew thoughtfully at his cigar and smiled rather bitterly as he resumed. "He was a fine figure of a man, that father of mine, 6 feet tall, blue-eyed and curly-haired, with a deep, compelling voice and the fire of fanaticism burning in his heart. The natives, Arab and Malay alike, took to his fiery gospel as the desert dwellers of Arabia once listened to the preaching of Mohammed, the camel-driver. My grandfather, a pirate prince with a marble palace and 1,000 slaves of his own, was one of the converts, and came to the mission bringing his 10-year-old daughter, Laila, with him. He left her at the mission school to learn the gentle teachings of the Prophet of Nazareth. She stayed there 4 years. Again our host paused, puffing silently at his cigar, seemingly attempting to marshal his thoughts. "I believe I said my father was a dissident clergyman?" "Yes, so I did, to be sure. Had he been a member of the established church, things might have been different. The established English clergy are bad enough, with their fox-hunting and general worldliness, but they're usually sportsmen. When she was a scant 15 years old, women of the East mature more rapidly than your Western women, you know. Laila, the Pearl of the Islands, came back to her father's palace of marble and cedar, bearing a little boy baby in her arms. The charitable Christian sister of the missionary had driven her out of the mission settlement when she learned that she, the sister, was about to have a little nephew, whose birth was not presanctified by a wedding ring. The old pirate was furious. He would have put his daughter and half-caste child to death and swooped down on the mission with fire and dagger, but my mother had learned much of the Christian charity during her stay at the school. She was sure, if she went to my father with as many pearls as her 2 hands could hold, and with a dowry of rubies strung around her neck, he would receive her as his wife, or make an honest woman of her, as the saying goes. However, one thing and another prevented her return to the mission for 3 years, and when we finally got there we found my reverend sire had taken an English lady to wife. Oh, he took the jewels my mother brought, no fear of his refusing, and in return for them he permitted us to live in the settlement as native hangers-on. She, a princess and the daughter of generations of princesses, scrubbed floors and baked bread in the house presided over by my father's wife, and I, my father's firstborn son, duly christened with his name, fetched and carried for my father's younger sons. They were hard, those days at the mission school. The white boys who were my half-brothers overlooked no chance to remind me of my mother's shame and my own disgrace. Humility and patience under affliction were the lessons my mother and I had ground into us day by day while we remained there. Then, when I was a lad of 10 years or so, my father's cousin, Viscount Abingdon, broke his neck at a fox hunt, and as he died without issue, my father became a member of England's landed gentry, and went back home to take over the title and the entails. He borrowed on his expectancy before he left, and offered my mother money to have me educated as a clerk in some trader's store, but my mother, for all her years of servitude, was still a princess of royal blood. Also she remembered enough Scripture to quote, "Thy money perish with thee." So she spat in his face and went back to the palace of her father, telling him that her husband was dead. I was sent to school in England. Oh yes, I am a public schoolman. Winchester, you know, and I was down for my first term at Cambridge when the war broke out in 1914. Why should I have fought for England? What had England or the English ever done for me? It was the call of the blood, the English blood perhaps. At any rate, I joined up and was gazetted to a London regiment. Everything was death or glory those days, you know, for king and country, and all that sort of tosh. Racial lines were wiped out, and every man, whatever his color or creed, was for the common cause. Rot. I came into the officers' mess one night after a hard day's drill, and was presented to a young man from one of the Guards regiments. "Lieutenant Richardson," my captain said. "This is Lieutenant Richardson." Queer coincidence, you chaps are both James Abington Richardson. Ought to be great pals on that account, what? The other Lieutenant Richardson looked me over from head to foot, then repeated distinctly, so every one in the room could hear and understand, "James, my boots need polishing. Attend to it." It was the same order he had given me at the mission school 100 times when we were lads together. He was Lieutenant the Honourable James Abington Richardson, legitimate eldest son of Viscount Abington. I was— He broke off, staring straight before him a moment, then— There was a devil of a row. Officers weren't supposed to beat other officers into insensibility in company mess, you know. I was dismissed from the service, and came back to the islands. My grandfather was dead, so was my mother. I was monarch of all I surveyed, if I was willing not to look too far, and since my return I have consecrated my life to repaying my debt to my father on such of his race as crossed my path. The hunting has been fairly good, too. White men are such fools. Ship after ship has run aground on the rocks here, sometimes in answer to my signal rockets, sometimes mistaking the red and green lamps on the hill up yonder for ships' lights. It's been profitable. Nearly every ship so far has contained enough loot to make the game distinctly worth the trouble. I must admit your ship was somewhat of a disappointment in respect of monetary returns, but then I have had the pleasure of your company. That's something. I keep a crew of Papuans around to do the dirty work, and let them eat a few prisoners now and then by way of reward. Don't mind an occasional helping of long pig myself, as a matter of fact, provided it is a white one. But," he smiled unpleasantly, "conditions aren't ideal yet. I still have to install electricity in the house and rig up a wireless apparatus. I could catch more game that way. And then there's the question of women. Remember how Holy Writ says, 'It is not good for man to dwell alone.' I've found it out already. Old Umera, the woman who played the drum tonight, and the slave girl Miriam are the only women in the establishment thus far, but I intend to remedy that soon. I shall send to one of the larger islands and buy several of the most beautiful maidens available within the next few months, and live as befits a prince, a pirate prince, even as my grandfather was. Now, white men," his suave manner dropped from him like a mask let down, and implacable hatred glared from his dark eyes, "this is my proposition to you. Before I establish my seraglio, it is necessary that I possess suitable furniture. I cannot spare any of my faithful retainers for the purpose of attending my women, but you two come into my hands providentially. Both of you are surgeons. You shall perform the necessary operations on each other. It is a matter of indifference to me which of you operates first. You may draw straws for the privilege, if you wish. But it is my will that you do this thing, and my will is law on this island." Both de Grandin and I looked at him in speechless horror, but he took no notice of our amazement. "You may think you will refuse," he told us, "but you will not. Captain Van Thuan, of the Dutch steamer Van Dam, and his first mate were offered the same chance and refused it. They chose to interview a little pet I keep about the premises as an alternative. But when the time for the interview came, both would gladly have reconsidered their decision. This house is the one place in the world where a white man must keep his word, willy-nilly. Both of them were obliged to carry out their bargain to the letter. And I cannot say the prestige of the pure Caucasian breed was strengthened by the way they did it. Now, I will give you gentlemen a greater opportunity for deliberation than I gave the Dutchman. You shall first be allowed to see my pet, then decide whether you will accept my offer or not. But I warn you beforehand, whatever decision you make must be adhered to. Come." He turned to the two armed Malays who stood behind his chair and barked an order. Instantly de Grandin and I were covered by their pistols, and the scowling faces behind the firearms sights told us we might expect no quarter if the order to fire were given. "Come," Gunong Basar, or Richardson, repeated imperiously, "walk ahead, you two, and remember, the first attempt either of you makes to escape will mean a bullet through his brain." We marched down a series of identical corridors as bewildering as the labyrinth of Crete, mysterious stone doors thudding shut behind us from time to time, other doors swinging open in the solid walls as our guards pressed cunningly concealed springs in the walls or floor. Finally we brought up on a sort of colonnaded porch, a tiled footpath bordered with a low stone parapet from which a row of carved stone columns rose to a concave ceiling of natural stone. Below the balcony's balustrade stretched a long, narrow pool of dead motionless water between abrupt, vertical walls of rock, and, some 200 feet away, through the arch of a natural cave, the star-lit tropical sky showed like a little patch of freedom before our straining eyes. The haze which had thickened the air the previous night must have cleared away, for rays of the bright, full moon painted a path to Spain over the waters at the cavern's mouth, and sent sufficient light as far back as our balcony to enable us to distinguish an occasional tiny ripple on the glassy surface below us. "Here, pretty," our captor called, leaning forward between two columns. "Come up and see the brave white men who may come to play with you. Here, pretty pet, come up, come up." We stared into the purple waters like lost souls gazing on the hell prepared for them, but no motion agitated the depths. "Sulky brute!" the half-caste exclaimed, and snatched a pistol from the girdle of one of his attendants. "Come up," he repeated harshly. "Damn you, come when I call." He tossed the weapon into the pool below. De Grandin and I uttered a gasp of horror in unison, and I felt his nails bite into my arm as his strong, slender fingers gripped me convulsively, as though the pistol had been superheated and capable of setting the water in the cave boiling by its touch. The deep, blue-black pool beneath us suddenly woke to life. Ripples, living, groping ripples, appeared on the pool's smooth face and long twisting arms. Sinuous as snakes, thick as a fire-hose, seemed waving just under the surface, flicking into the air now and again, and displaying tentacles roughened with great, wart-like protuberances. Something like a monster bubble, transparent grey like a jellyfish, yet oddly spotted like an unclean reptile, almost as big around as the umbrellas used by teamsters on their wagons in summer-time, and, like an umbrella, ribbed at regular intervals, rose from the darker water, and a pair of monstrous, hideous white eyes, large as dinner plates with black pupils large as saucers, stared greedily, unwinkingly at us. "Nom de Dieu! Nom de Dieu!" de Grandin breathed. "The sea-devil, the giant octopus." "Quite so," Gunong Bassar agreed affably. "The giant octopus. What he grasps he holds for ever, and he grasps all he can reach. A full-grown elephant thrown into that water would have no more chance of escape than a minnow, or, for unpleasant example, than you gentlemen would. Now perhaps you realize why Captain Van Thun and his first officer wished they had chosen to enter my employ, albeit in a somewhat extraordinary capacity. I did not afford them a chance of viewing the alternative beforehand as I have you, however. Now that you have had your chance, I am sure you will take the matter under serious advisement before you refuse. There is no hurry. You will be given all tonight and tomorrow to arrive at a decision. I shall expect your answer at dinner tomorrow. Good night, gentlemen. My boys will show you to your room. Good night, and may I wish you pleasant dreams?" With a mocking laugh he stepped quickly back into the shadows. We heard the sound we had come to recognize as the closing of one of the hidden stone doors, and found ourselves alone upon the balcony overlooking the den of the giant octopus. "Bon Dieu!" de Grandin cried despairingly. "Trowbridge, my friend, they make a mistake, those people who insist the devil dwells in hell. Parbleu, what is that?" The noise which startled him was the shuffling of bare brown feet. The tongueless youths who acted as our valets de chambre were coming reluctantly toward us down the passageway, their eyes rolling in fearful glances toward the balustrade beyond which the devil of the sea lurked in his watery lair. "Eh bien," the Frenchman shrugged, "it is the two devilkins again. Lead on, mes enfants. Any place is better than this threshold of hell. And now," he announced as he dropped into one of the bedroom's wicker chairs and lighted a cigarette, "we are in what you Americans would call a tight fix, friend Trowbridge. To accede to that half-caste hellion's proposition would be to dishonor ourselves forever. That is unthinkable. But to be eaten up by that so infernal octopus, that too is unthinkable. Morbleu, had I known then what I know now, I should have demanded £1,000 a day from those Messieurs Lloyd, and then refused their offer. And your so splendid soldiers were wont to say during the war, we are, of a surety, S.O.L., my friend." Beneath the bamboo bedstead across the room a slight rustling sounded. I looked apathetically toward the bed, indifferent to any fresh horror which might appear. But wretched as I was not prepared for the apparition which emerged. stripped of her gorgeous raiment of pineapple gauze, a sarong and jacket of the cheapest native cotton inadequately covering her glorious body, an ivory wood button replacing her diamond nose-stud, her feet bare and no article of jewelry adorning her, Miriam the dancer crept forth and flung herself to her knees before de Grandin. "Oh, monsieur," she begged, in a voice choked with tears, "have pity on me, I implore you. Be merciful to me, as you would have another in your place be pitiful to your sister, were she in mine." "Morbleu, child, is it of me you ask pity?" de Grandin demanded. "How can I, who cannot even choose my own death, show compassion to you?" "Kill me," she answered fiercely. "Kill me now, while yet there is time. See, I have brought you this." From the folds of her scanty sarong she drew a native kris, a wavy-bladed short sword with a razor edge and needle point. "Stab me with it," she besought. "Then, if you wish to use it on your friend and yourself, there is no other hope. Look about you. Do not you see there is no way of dying in this prison-room? Once upon a time the mirror was of glass, but a captive white man broke it and almost succeeded in cutting his wrists with the pieces until he died. Since then Gunong Bassar has had a metal mirror in this room." "Pardieu, you are right, child," de Grandin agreed as he glanced at the dressing-table over which the metal mirror hung. "But why do you seek death? Are you, too, destined for the octopus?" She shuddered. "Some day, perhaps. But while I retain my beauty there is small fear of that. Every day old Umara, the one-eyed she-devil, teaches me to dance, and when I do not please her, and she is very hard to please, she beats me with bamboo rods on the soles of my feet till I can scarcely bear to walk. And Gunong Bassar makes me dance for him every night till I am ready to drop, and if I do not smile upon him as I dance, or if I grow weary too soon, so that my feet lag before he gives me permission to stop, he beats me. Every time a ship is caught in his trap, he saves some of the officers and makes me dance before them, and I know they are to be fed to the fish-devil, yet I must smile upon them, or he will beat me till my feet bleed, and the old woman will beat me when he is weary of it. My father was French, monsieur, though I myself was born in England of a Spanish mother. We lost all our money in the war, for my father kept a goldsmith's shop in Reims, and the Salbok stole everything he had. We came to the islands after the war, and my father made money as a trader. We were returning home on the Dutch ship Van Dam, when Gunong Bassar caught her in his trap. Me he kept to be taught to dance the dances of the islands, and to be tortured. See, he has put a ring in my nose, like a native woman's." She lifted a trembling hand to the wooden button which kept the hole pierced in her nose from growing together when she was not wearing her jewelled stud. "My father, O God of Israel, he fed to the fish-devil before my eyes, and told me he would serve me the same way if I proved not submissive to his will in all things. And so, monsieur," she ended simply, "I would that you cause me to die, and be out of my unhappiness." As the girl talked, de Grandin's face registered every emotion from amazement to horror and compassion. As she completed her narrative he looked thoughtful. "Wait, wait, my pretty one," he besought, as she would have forced the kris into his hand. "I must think. Pardieu, Jules de Grandin, you silly fool, you must think now as never before." He sank his face in his hands and bowed his chin nearly to his knees. "Tell me, my little cabbage," he demanded suddenly, "do they let you out of this accursed house by daylight, hein?" "Oh, yes," she responded. "I may go or come as I will when I am not practicing my dances or being beaten. I may go anywhere on the island I wish, for no one, not even the cannibals who live on the shore, would dare lay his little finger on me for fear of the master. I belong to Gunong Bassar, and he would feed anyone who touched his property to the great fish devil. And why have you never sought to die by your own hand? de Grandin asked suspiciously. Jews do not commit suicide, she answered proudly. To die by another's hand is not forbidden. Jephthah's daughter so died. But to go from light with your hands reddened with your own blood is against the law of my fathers. Ah, yes, I understand, he agreed with a short nod. You children of Jacob shame us so-called Christians in the way you keep your precepts, child. Eh bien, 'tis fortunate for all us you have a strong conscience, my beautiful. Attend me. In your walks about this never-enough-to-be execrated island have you observed, near the spot where the masts which carry the false ship's light stand, certain plants growing, plants with shining leaves and a fruit like the unripe apple which grows in France, a low bush of fruit of pale green? The girl wrinkled her white forehead thoughtfully, then nodded twice. Yes, she replied, I have seen such a plant. Très bien, he nodded approvingly. The way from which this evil place seems to open before us, mes amis. At least we have the sporting chance. Now listen, and listen well, my little half-orange, for upon your obedience rests our chance of freedom. Tomorrow, when you have a chance to leave this vestibule of hell, go you to the place where those fruits like apples grow, and gather as many of them as you can carry in your sarong. Bring these little fruits of Cuculus indicus to the house and smash them to a pulp in some jar which you must procure. At the dinner hour, pour the contents of that jar into the water where dwells the devil-fish. Do not fail us, my little pigeon, for upon your faithful performance of your trust our lives and yours depend. Pardieu, if you do but carry out your orders, we shall feed that monster octopus such a meal as he will have small belly for, parbleu. When you have poured all the crushed fruit into the water, secrete yourself in the shadows near by and wait till we come. You can swim? Good. When we do leap into the water, do you leap also, and together we shall swim to that boat I was about to borrow when we met this so excellent Monsieur Gunong Bassar, James Abington Richardson Devil. Cordieu, I think that Jules de Grandin is not such a fool as I thought he was. Good night, fairest one, and may the God of your people, and the gentle Mary too, guard you this night and all the nights of your life. Good evening, gentlemen, Gunong Bassar greeted as we entered the dining-room next evening. Have you decided upon our little proposition? But certainly, de Grandin assured him. If we must choose between a few minutes' conversation with the octopus and a lifetime, or even half an hour's sight of your neither black nor white face, we cast our vote for the fish. He, at least, does what he does from nature. He is no vile parody of his kind. Let us go to the fish-house, vite, monsieur. The sooner we get this business completed, the sooner we shall be rid of you. Gunong Bassar's pale countenance went absolutely livid with fury. You insignificant little fool, he cried. I'll teach you to insult me. Harum! He sent the call echoing through the marble-lined cave. You will not be so brave when you feel those tentacles strangling the life out of your puny body, and that beak tearing your flesh off your bones before the water has a chance to drown you. He poured a string of burning orders at his two guards, who seized their rifles and thrust them at us. Off to the grotto, he shrieked, beside himself with rage. Don't think you can escape the devil-fish by resisting my men. They won't shoot to kill. They'll only cripple you and drag you to the pool. Will you walk, or shall we shoot you first and pull you there? Monsieur de Grandin drew himself proudly erect. A gentleman of France fears no death a Malay batard can offer. Lead on. Biting his pale lips till the blood ran to keep from screaming with fury, Gunong Bassar signalled his guards, and we took up our way toward the sea-monster's lair. Le bon Dieu, Grant la belle Juve has done her work thoroughly, de Grandin whispered as we came out upon the balcony. "I like not this part of our little playlet, my friend. Should our plan have failed, adieu." He gave my hand a hasty pressure. "Who goes first?" Gunong Bassar asked as we halted by the balustrade. "Pardieu, you do," de Grandin shouted, and before any one was aware of his intention he dashed one of his small, hard fists squarely into the astonished half-caste's face, seized him about the waist, and flung him bodily into the black, menacing water below. "In, friend Trowbridge," he called, leaping upon the parapet. "Dive and swim, it is our only chance." I waited no second bidding, but jumped as far outward as possible, striking out vigorously toward the far end of the cave, striving to keep my head as near water level as possible, yet draw an occasional breath. Horror swam beside me. Each stroke I took I expected one of the monster's slimy tentacles to seize me and drag me under, but no great, grey bubble rose from the black depths, no questing arms reached toward me. For all we could observe to the contrary, the pool was as harmless as any of the thousands of rocky caves which dot the volcanic coast of Malaya. Bullets whipped and tore the water around us, striking the rocky walls and singing off in various ricochets, but the light was poor, and the Malay marksmen emptied their pieces with no effect. "Triomphe!" de Grandin announced, blowing the water from his mouth in a great, gusty sigh of relief as we gained the shingle outside the cave. "Miriam, my beautiful one, are you with us?" "Yes," responded a voice from the darkness. "I did as you bade me, monsieur," and the great fish-devil sank almost as soon as he thrust his snake arms into the fruit as it floated on the water. But when I saw he was dead, I did not dare wait, but swam out here to abide your coming." "It is good," de Grandin commended. "One of those bullets might easily have hit you. They are execrable marksmen, those Malays, but accidents do occur. Now, monsieur," he addressed the limp bundle he towed behind him in the water, "I have a little business proposition for you. Will you accompany us, and be delivered to the Dutch or British to be hanged for the damned pirate you are, or will you fight me for your so miserable life here and now?" "I cannot fight you now," Gunong Bassar answered. "You broke my arm with your cowardly jiu-jitsu when you took advantage of me and attacked me without warning." "Ah, so," de Grandin replied, helping his captive to the beach. "It is unfortunate, for mordieu, scoundrel, would you do so?" The Eurasian had suddenly drawn a dagger from his coat and lunged viciously at de Grandin's breast. With the agility of a cat, the Frenchman evaded the thrust, seized his antagonist's wrist, and twisted the knife from his grasp. His foot shot out. He drove his fist savagely into Gunong's throat, and the half-caste sprawled helplessly on the sand. "Attend, mademoiselle," de Grandin called to me. "It is not well for her to see what I must do here." There was a sound of a scuffle, then a horrible gargling noise, and the beating of hands and feet upon the sands. "Finis," de Grandin remarked nonchalantly, dipping his hands in the water and cleansing them of some dark stains. "You," I began. "Mais certainement," he replied matter-of-factly. "I slit his throat. What would you have? He was a mad dog. Why should he continue to live?" Walking hurriedly along the beach, we came to the little power-boat moored in the inlet and set her going. "Where to?" I asked as de Grandin swung the trim little craft around a rocky promontory. "Do you forget, cher Trowbridge, that we have a score to settle with those cannibals?" he asked. We settled it. Running the launch close inshore, de Grandin shouted defiance to the Papuans till they came tumbling out of their cone-shaped huts like angry bees from their hives. "Saha, messieurs," de Grandin called, "we give you food of another sort this night. Eat, Sakarkania, eat it." The Lewis machine-gun barked and sputtered, and a chorus of cries and groans rose from the beach. "It is well," he announced as he resumed the wheel. "They eat no more white women, those ones." Indeed, did I still believe the teachings of my youth, I should say they were even now partaking of the devil's hospitality with their late master. "But see here," I demanded, as we chugged our way toward the open water, "what was it you told Miriam to put in the water where the octopus was, de Grandin?" He chuckled. "Had you studied as much biology as I, friend Trowbridge, you would recognize that glorious plant, the Coccolus indicus, when you saw it. All over the Polynesian islands the lazy natives, who desire to obtain food with the minimum of labor, mash up the berry of that plant and spread it in the water where the fish swim. A little of it will render the fish insensible, a little more will kill him as dead as the late lamented Gunong Basar. I noticed that plant growing on the island, and when our lovely Jewess told me she could go and come at will, I said to me, by the George, why not have her poison that great devil fish and swim to freedom? Voilà tout." A passing Dutch steamer picked us up 2 days later. The passengers and crew gaped widely at Miriam's imperial beauty, and wider still at de Grandin's account of our exploits. "Pardieu," he confided to me one night as we walked the deck, "I fear those Dutchmen misbelieve me, friend Trowbridge. Perhaps I shall have to slit their ears to teach them to respect the word of a Frenchman." It was 6 months later that a Western Union messenger entered my consulting room at Harrisville and handed me a blue and white envelope. "Sign here," he ordered. I tore the envelope open, and this is what I read. "Miriam made big sensation in Follies Bergerets tonight. Felicitations, de Grandin." End of Isle of Missing Ships, Part 2.